So we're looking at part 27 of our hydrotherapy series, the theory and practice of hydrotherapy. And just a reminder that as you navigate any health challenge, that you partner with a medical practitioner that shares your philosophy of care of the human body, both in health and disease. And we're just talking about various tools that you can add to your wellness toolbox. And others have used them as beneficial aids in returning themselves to health or maintaining health. But anything that comes along, make sure you thoroughly investigate it for yourself, any treatment or protocol or procedure, and don't just blindly accept anything that comes along. Do your own due diligence and make sure it's going to work for you. Back in 1903, early in January, Thomas Edison made the statement that the doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will instruct his patient in the care of the human frame, in diet, and the cause and prevention of disease. An interesting time in church history as well as world history. Ellen White in 1885, even before that, in the Testimonies for the Church, stated that there are many ways of practicing the healing art. And there's only one way that heaven approves. She goes on to say that those are the natural agencies of nature: pure air and water, cleanliness, a proper diet, and purity of life, as well as a firm trust in God. So if you think about the acronym that's often used, New Start, it has the T at the end rather than New Star. So you're not just making yourself into a brilliant, healthy being, but you're trusting in divine power to do that and having that relationship with God. And that firm trust in God is very important for allowing those remedies to be attributed to their proper source of healing, and that's to God. So fresh air, exercise, pure water, and clean, sweet premises are within the reach of all. And it's not expensive, but drugs are expensive both in their cost monetarily as well as their taxing nature on the system of the body. 3 John 1 verse 2 says, "Beloved, I pray that you may prosper in all things and be in health just as your soul prospers." An admonition to take care of our soul, our spiritual life with God, in as much of a diligent way as we do the rest of our lives. And there may be some significant truth and parallels there, that people who disregard their body as a temple of the Holy Spirit and do whatever they want with it are probably often lax in their study of spiritual things and their walk with God. Not always the case, but I would dare say that that's often the case. And as people become closer in their walk with God, they become more attuned to the way God has made their bodies in a fearfully wonderful way. Romans 12, 1 and 2 says, "I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service." It's not unreasonable, it's reasonable. "And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God." We're also admonished again to make our bodies that God has made for us to live in, because we're fearfully and wonderfully made, a source or a thing of study, that we understand its needs and do our part in preserving it from harm and defilement. So that way we can be the living, the temple of the Holy Spirit. And that's what we want to be able to provide. So tonight we're going to start with the shallow, cold foot bath. So last week we talked, or last time, part 26, we talked about the hot foot bath. This is the shallow, cold foot bath. The feet are bathed in a shallow water bath, as you can see in this picture here. It's not even covering the tops of their feet, but it has some beneficial reflexive properties on the blood vessels and can help the brain, the pelvic organs. And it's in duplicate there, as well as your liver, and also causes muscle contractions. So you're putting your feet in the cold water causes a systemic contractions of muscles, particularly in the lower abdominal region. So the uterine contraction causes the muscles to contract, a bladder contraction, intestinal contraction, and stomach. So it's not to be used during a woman's period or during acute inflammation in respiratory, pelvic, or abdominal regions, because you don't want that extra reflexive contraction of blood, of muscle tissue in those situations. It wouldn't be beneficial. So avoid those types of situations when using the shallow cold foot bath. So to apply this particular modality, you're going to want to use some supplies that are similar to the hot foot bath. You'll need a foot tub, so similar to the other one, although it's going to be more shallow. The one below is going to be more shallow in nature. You need a thermometer, a bath towel, thermometer, just to make sure that you have the water at the right temperature between 45 and 65. So this is relatively cold, not ice water, but cold water. And then you want to protect the flooring or bedding around which this activity is taking place. Put the water in the pan up to 2 to 4 inches deep, and then make sure that temperature is between 45 and 65 degrees Fahrenheit. And then you want to have things ready to go with your hot, shallow foot bath. So before you put the person's feet in the cold water, you should have their feet pre-warmed. So have a hot foot bath nearby, have the hot foot bath, get their body warmed, because that hot foot bath gives the overall body a feeling or sensation of warmth, whether or not it is actually warm. Warm feet help a lot. They're huge. And then rub the feet together or in the hands once you then put them into the cold water. So it's that friction will help intensify the reaction to it. And the duration is 1 to 5 minutes, so a shorter period of time than you would use in the hot foot bath. And then dry the feet well following that duration of 1 to 5 minutes, and keep the person warm. So again, that has contractile benefits on the stomach, the bladder, uterine area, and lower pelvic regions, intestines. The next one we'll look at is the Stitz bath. And basically it's sitting in water to bathe or soak in. And it's derived from a German word that is sitzen, or to sit. It was made popular by Vincent Presenitz, he's known as the father of modern hydrotherapy in Austria. He has an interesting history and story. He had some livestock that got hurt, and he treated them essentially with water therapy, water bandages, and they recovered. He ended up having himself injured. This was in the early parts of 1700s, 1800s, maybe earlier than that. And he saved his hand from getting infected and having to be amputated or even killing him in those days by doing water bandages and treatments and water treatments. And it saved his hand from infection. So he used water therapy and water treatments, and was at the height of his activities around the late 1800s as began to learn more about hydrotherapy. So he utilized Stitz bath as a remedy. He did primarily for constipation, abdominal issues, and pelvic conditions. So there's a diagram there on the left, someone sitting in a tub. They actually make specialized tubs for that. You can see an antique one there in the middle, and some in a sales catalog. You can use just a basin, like a wash basin, or they have these kind of tipped, pre-made chair kind of contraptions that were used for Stitz baths, because they actually were quite commonly used. And we'll see several variations on this theme as we go through the presentation here. But there's different ways to apply it. So supplies that you need: a wash tub or a Stitz tub. So the top right picture is a Stitz tub of various type there, specifically designed for this. You can use just a wash tub, wash basin. It may be helpful to actually have it tilted on edge in a sturdy fashion so that the water is more conducive for your body posture. If you don't have that, even just a simple bathtub can do that too. One thing that you want to be sure that you always do along with this is a hot foot bath. A foot bath is used in conjunction with the Stitz bath. So it's not the Stitz bath alone. Most pictures and most diagrams don't include the Stitz bath, or not the Stitz bath, but the hot foot bath, but that should be used in conjunction with it. So even in a bathtub, you should have a hot foot bath associated with it. And typically that water temperature is going to be higher than the water that you're actually sitting in. So if you're using a bathtub, and you can use a bathtub, people use it that way all the time, you want to make sure that the water is at least navel high, so that it's bathing the lower pelvic region of the body. So the effects of the sitz bath can be altered by the water temperature that's used. And we'll talk about some of those different types of sitz baths and the water temperature variations and their benefits. So in general, you want to just be able to help the person into the tub. This can be done on your own too. It's just a little bit more awkward, especially if you're getting down into a wash tub or a sitz bath tub of some nature. It can be difficult to get up out of. I noticed that one of the sitz bath tubs had kind of elbow rests that could be helpful in launching oneself back out of it. But you want to provide toweling between your body and the tub edge, so there's no hard pressure points on your legs or your back on the sitz tub that you're in. And another thing that isn't often shown in most diagrams is covering the person with a blanket and making sure to keep it dry. So you're going to maintain the heat and the steam that's coming from the water, especially if it's a hot bath. Cut down on any drafts that are moving around. The water should immerse the hips up to the abdomen. So we said navel height in the bathtub situation. And then make sure that you have the accessory foot bath, which is typically several degrees of temperature above that of the sitz bath itself, and provides overall warming effects. So in a hot sitz bath, you're actually going to have some cold compresses available because the whole body temperature will rise. And you'll want to make sure you keep the head cool and the neck cool during that application. So the water temperature or the time of duration of the sitz bath is going to depend on the water temperature, typically shorter times for cooler temperatures, longer times for warmer temperatures. So the typical duration is 3 to 8 minutes, but they can be longer. Oftentimes a friction rub will be applied to the person who is in the sitz bath. For a cold bath, it functions to intensify, or if the person is chilly. And if you're using a hot sitz bath, you could do a cold quench at the conclusion. So a hot bath has a cooling or cooling it down to neutral, or a cold water douse over the hips and thighs. You can also use a cold compress on the forehead and neck, just paying attention to the person's overall body temperature during the duration of the sitz bath. So there are 6 different sitz baths and their uses, and we'll go through the different types. There's a cold sitz bath. So this is using water temperature that's from 55 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. And the foot bath is going to be between 105 and 110. So there's a fair separation in temperature, about 50 degrees, 45 degrees difference in the sitz bath and that of the foot bath. I added the foot bath to the diagram here because, as I said before, most diagrams leave out the foot bath component of it. And that'll be particularly important for the cold one, because it's going to give the person an overall feeling of warmth. So it will kind of overcome the cold. It also functions to draw blood to the feet, and the sitting in the cold water is going to drive a contraction effect on the lower pelvic region. So the water is going to cover the hips and cover the abdominal region. So we talked about the water needing to be up to the navel. So you can rub the hips to promote circulation using friction mitts, keeping the water moving and circulating around the individual for 2 to 4 minutes. And what this does is it stimulates the pelvic muscles, the bowels, the bladder, and the uterus. So the addition of the rubbing intensifies the reaction. So it's going to intensify the cold and contractility reaction. It helps to aid in constipation, and also helps in individuals who have subinvolution, which is essentially an incomplete uterine retraction, typically postpartum. So the uterus is protruding out and hasn't been retracted into the abdominal cavity. And it also reduces pelvic inflammatory thickening that is often an issue in women's health. So a prolonged cold sitz bath So we saw that that other one was 1 to 8 minutes or 3 to 8 minutes. This is a prolonged one. The water temperature is it's still cold, but it's below body temperature, so it will have the feeling of coldness, but it's not ice again. So 70 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, a very nice diagram of a sitz bath container. Be very interesting to be able to find one of those. Looks more convenient than using other options. There's a toilet-based sitz bath that you can get these additions to put in your commode, which doesn't allow you to get the total abdominal effects. It is called a sitz bath, and it is good for soaking at some level, but not to the same effect that we're talking about here with the total thigh and abdominal submersion. So the foot bath is going to have 105 to 110 degree temperature. So there's a closer proximity in the water temperature of the sitz bath and that of the foot bath. And it can be higher. The foot bath can be higher than that and then cooled or allowed to cool. And this is going to be, again, prolonged. So it's going to be 15 to 40 minutes. And that foot bath, again, is going to help maintain a sensation of warmth, even though they're having a cool, cold bath immersion process. So it shouldn't induce chilling, and don't use rubbing in this because you don't want to intensify the cold to the point where they want to get out right away. So you're not looking for an intense reaction, you're just looking for a prolonged reaction. So you can add additional warming effects if the hot foot bath is not adequate. You can do a hot fomentation or hot water bottle to the spinal area, and that can help bring an overall body systemic warming effect in addition to the foot bath. So it has benefits in powerful, lasting pelvic blood vessel contraction and uterine wall subinvolution remedy. So this can be helpful in, it's not a prolapsed uterus. A prolapse is like a slipped out and it's exterior to the body, but it's kind of moving that direction. The uterus is out of position and more forward in the abdominal area than it should be. And the uterine blood vessel contractions that can be helpful to stave off postpartum bleeding, I would think would be a good possibility for that contraction, along with things like using herbs like raspberry leaf tea. It's also great for those astringent needs for postpartum bleeding. So the neutral bath, this is a bath of water that's near body temperature. So remember that your body temperature is at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about 37 C or Celsius. The water temperature is just below body temperature, so it's going to feel tepid. The foot bath is going to be warmer than that. It's going to be above body temperature. But in this tepid bath, especially with the foot warming aspects, you can spend 20 minutes to 1 to 2 hours in. This can be a very relaxing, sleep promoting sitz bath. And so for someone who has insomnia, sometimes a tepid bath like that that's just right about neutral in body temperature can be very soothing and relaxing. So sleep promoting. Then we move up to the very hot sitz bath, and that starts at 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's above body temperature, so it's going to feel hot. But then you're going to add water to it. So you want to have boiling water nearby that you can add and have your thermometer there so you know what the water temperature is doing. As water is added, you want to make sure that you move it around like you would during a foot bath. Stir it in nicely so it doesn't hurt or burn the person. Stir it in, and it'll bring it, you want to bring it up to 106 to 115 degrees Fahrenheit as the person can tolerate it. The foot bath is going to be 110 to 120, so approximately 2 degrees variance from the bath higher. So it's going to be incrementally higher than the sitz bath itself. And this is going to be a shorter duration treatment, 1 to 3 minutes. You're going to be doing compresses to the head, keeping the neck and head cool during this. And you want to finish with a neutral bath for 1 to 3 minutes. So you can bring that to a neutral bath just by adding cold water and stirring it in until it drops the temperature. And that can be a way to use the same container or containment system for the water and not have to change physical locations. So if sweating is induced, which is a possibility, you can use cold water over the shoulders to quench it. It can aid in dysmenorrhea, which is some PMS cramping. You don't want to use the cooling effect when you are treating it for PMS cramping. And then also various pelvic pain respond well to very hot sitz bath treatment. Then you're going to be using, could use the revulsive sitz bath, and that's going from a very hot to cold. So you're going to be starting at 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That's just above body temperature, 2 degrees above temperature, and then rapidly increasing it to 106, 115. Again, keeping the foot bath above that temperature. And the duration is going to be 3 to 8 minutes with a cold compress to the head and neck. And then you're going to finish with a cold quench. You're going to be pale pouring 55 to 65 degree water. It's going to feel like ice water. It's going to cause a major blood vessel contraction and astringent effect. And I'm going to be pouring it over the hips in the water. So it can benefit chronic pelvis issues like salpingitis. So anything with itis is inflammation. So salpingitis is actually inflammation of the fallopian tube. So in the diagram on the right, it's the third one over. The fallopian tube is the tube which the egg, when released from the ovary, travels into the uterus for implantation in the wall if fertilized. Then there's parametritis, which is the inflammation of the endometrium, and cellulitis. And there's also oophorytis. There's some different itises there around the uterine area. So the oophorytis is the inflammation of the ovary itself. And then also can be beneficial for male problems as well, the prostate, hyperplasia. So useful for lower pelvic region issues, both male and female. Then we can use an alternate hot and cold sitz bath. So this is essentially a contrast bath. You'll need to have 2 sitz tubs side by side. So this was the first picture I found of 2 sitz tubs side by side. Look like they've been sitting in the junkyard for a while. A little bit of green algae growing on them, but those are some classic porcelain sitz baths, and they would function just great. You can use 2 wash tubs. It would be difficult to use a tub for this because it's a larger volume. You need to be able to move between 2 bodies of water in close succession. So two tubs side by side. So again, like a contrast shower, hot and cold. This is a contrast sitz bath. So hot, 105 degrees to 115 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's hot. It's above your body temperature. And then the cold is going to feel like ice water again, 55 to 65. And then you want to have a foot bath available for each of those tubs. So in the bottom diagram, I inserted that foot bath there, a secondary picture with the sitz bath, the porcelain sitz bath. And you want to be able to rotate between those 2 and have a hot foot bath available for each one. It'd be helpful to have an attendant in this just to help keep the water warm and in its proper place, and just help with just the movement from place to place. This could be difficult to administer for someone who was frail, just because it would take more muscular strength of the attendant to move the person back and forth. It's typically probably used in people who are more able-bodied. So you want to use a cold compress to the head and neck, again, as the body temperature heats up in the warm, in the hot water bath. So typically when we see contrast used, it's a 3 rotation, hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold, ending in the cold. And then you want to dry off thoroughly and rest for 30 to 60 minutes following. And that's true for any hydrotherapy treatment, because you don't want to negate the positive benefits. The positive benefits are increasing pelvic circulation. So again, remember that hot and cold functions like a pump. It's like another heart, essentially, but you have focus areas. If you're doing this on your elbow, you would be doing kind of pumping blood through the elbow area. So if someone had an infection of some kind, one of the things it does is it promotes macrophage presence, white blood cells, to the pelvic region, because that's the area that's being focused on. The blood is being drawn in through vasodilation, driven away through vasoconstriction, drawn in, pushed out, drawn in, pushed out. So it basically helps decongest inflamed pelvic regions. So anything that's in the pelvis from the navel down is it going to have a benefit of increased circulation? And what does increased circulation do? It takes away toxins and debris from the site, and circulation brings in oxygen and nutrients to the site, as well as other white blood cells that are necessary. So in congestion, it all just slows down and kind of parks itself, and you don't have the movement of metabolic byproducts in and out, and the nourishment and sustaining healing action that would take place. So it helps to promote healing using that alternate hot and cold sitz bath. We know that that's true for hot and cold showers. Hot and cold showers are a total body immersion or drench that have been shown clinically to increase overall immunity by increasing white blood cell count, which is something that you should be doing, particularly in the winter months when lower immune systems are prevalent.
To be aware of new videos like this one, be sure to subscribe to the Preparing for the Time of Trouble channel. For more free videos and downloadable audio podcasts, as well as handouts, go to www.preparingforthetimeoftrouble.com. Topic categories include recordings of live seminar presentations, country living, sustainable gardening, homestead remedies, how to be self-sufficient when the grid goes down, wild edible and medicinal plants, hydrotherapy, and end-time Bible prophecies. To take advantage of these free resources, go to preparingforthetimeoftrouble.com.